Uddalaka continue to contemplate. When the mind perceives the body as distinct from it, abandons its own conditioning, the concepts, and recognizes its own transient nature, it is victorious. Mind and body are each other's foes, hence supreme happiness follows their destruction. For when they come together, there is a host of suffering on account of their mutual conflict. I think this paragraph could very easily be misread, so let's be careful with that one. When the mind perceives the body as distinct from it, this, I think what it means here is it's no longer identifying with the body. It abandons its own conditioning, its concepts, in other words, when it moves beyond the cognitive process and realizes there's nothing permanent about anything that is going on. It's victorious. So this is mind in the sense of self, rather than mind in the sense of cognitive process. So it's when the self perceives the body as distinct from it, when the self goes beyond the limiting concepts, and when the self realizes that everything is transient, nothing is fixed, nothing is permanent, then the self is victorious. Mind and body are each other's foes, hence supreme happiness follows their destruction. Well, I would say here that it's actually mind and body are the foes of the self. We've heard recently, or been exploring recently, how the mind can work against us. The body obviously works against us when it's always needing to be fed. It gets ill, it ages, it gets broken. But the mind too can be our own worst enemy. We are not the mind and we're not the body. When I say the mind is our worst enemy, what does that mean that we are? What am I then if I'm not the mind and I'm not the body? You can say I'm the soul if you like, but that comes with all sorts of predigested notions about immortality and things. But what's quite clear is I'm not the mind and I'm not the body, since both these things conspire to work against me. So supreme happiness follows their destruction. This seems to be the traditional yogic attitude that we're getting here. But what we can do is we can destroy our identification with them. We can destroy our identification with the mind and with the body. Some people like to pump up their body, and that fits them with their self-image. But some people like to, rather than physical posturing, they like to adopt intellectual posturing. Some people are so much into intellectual posturing, and it's just as absurd as physical posturing. Identifying with the mind is no more virtuous than identifying with the body. I would say it's mind and body that are foes of the self. Well, I think the mind is also the enemy of the body. When you think about what the mind does to the body in terms of inducing bad habits on the body. So we can disengage from the identification with the mind and the body. I think that's what we can say is their destruction here. For when they come together, there's a host of suffering on account of their mutual conflict. When the mind and body, when we identify with the mind and body, we're identifying with a conflict. We're identifying with a conflict between mind and body. So we can move beyond that identification, move beyond identification with either the mind or the body. The mind gives birth to the body through its own thought force, and throughout the body's lifetime, the mind feeds it with the mind's own sorrow. Well, this is very true. Why do people get addicted to drugs which damage their health? Why do people comfort eat? What emotional unhappiness brings us to abuse ourselves? And most of us do it in some form or another, whether it's overeating, drugs, including alcohol, whether it's overworking. Anyway, the list goes on. So the mind gives birth to the body through its own thought force. You can take this on any level you like, really. The thought force is simply the pattern and momentum of our psychological tendencies. And the mind gives birth to the body in the sense of creating also a self-image. The body is very much part of our self-image. And what we think of our own body is usually far removed from anybody else's idea of the body. You might want to take this in more metaphysical terms, that the mind literally gives birth to the body, but I don't find that way of thinking of much use. Thus, tortured by sorrow, the body wishes to destroy the mind, its own parent. Well, the mind tortures us. There is no friend nor enemy in this world. That which gives us pleasure is considered our friend, and that which causes pain is our enemy. Yeah, I think all it's saying here is there's not really any friend or enemy. There's only pleasure and pain. And we consider what gives us pleasure our friend and what gives us pain our enemy. When thus the mind and the body are constantly engaged in mutual destruction, how can one have happiness? It is by the destruction of the mind that there can be happiness. Hence the body tries every day in deep sleep to destroy the mind. Well, it tries to do it by sitting in front of the television, sitting in front of the computer, getting drunk or seeking oblivion through drugs, getting addicted to romantic notions of romance, somebody that will absolve us of all our pain, getting lost in fiction, whatever. We try to tranquilize the mind, don't we? However, until self-knowledge is attained, one unwittingly promotes the strength of the other, and they seem to function together for a common purpose, even as water and fire, though opposed to each other, work together for a common cause. For example, cooking. So water and fire, this is like the mind and the body, two contrary opposites battling with each other, and this constitutes most people's lives. This battle between the mind and the body. It's an interesting way of looking at things, isn't it? And we identify with one aspect or the other. We usually identify with the body, or we identify with the mind, or we identify alternately between the two. We try to find a balance between the two, and on it goes. But we can transcend that whole conflict. That's what this chapter seems to be about.